So you're taking the biggest the aim of the series of the podcast is to really understand California, understand the issues that California is facing, and fix it eventually. And you're a policy advocacy manager at the Los Angeles LGBT Center. You also work at UCLA, where you run homelessness prevention. So,
That was as a graduate student.
as a graduate student. And what were you studying?
Just a master of public policy.
Public policy. And so in this conversation we will discuss homelessness, drug addiction, crime, how to solve it, and how it is affecting LGBT communities, what we can do on the state level, especially. So let's start with homelessness. What got you interested in it in the first place? How did you get involved in the work of writing music?
So and I'll just want to say for the record, like all these opinions are my own. It's not the Los Angeles LGBT Center, the City of West Hollywood, the City of LA, or UCLA, or any of the other entities I've been associated with, because they get upset. Right? So this is just me, Robert Gamboa. And obviously homelessness is a big issue. It's been a challenge in California for a long time. It's probably the most visible problem. And it just only seems to get worse. When I went to graduate school in 2017 at UCLA and working with some of my students and other students in the cohort, we were trying to think of a way that might be able to respond to some of the situation, right? Like what are some of the systemic issues? What are some of the systems issues? And what could be done, right?
And have you had any personal experience with homelessness? Were you homeless, or did you have any negative experience with someone who attacked you, crime, drugs?
Sure, all the above, right? I'm 14 years sober, almost 14 years sober. And in my addiction, I was homeless for a while. But I wasn't what we would say was street homeless. I was like couch surfing, which is another category of homelessness.
At friends' places or
friends'
family?
places, going from place to place for several years in my addiction. And so in my addiction, I also became HIV positive, and I saw lots of people die. I saw lots of people, especially communities of color, especially LGBTQ community members, transgender community members. There were, while we say yes, there are resources for everyone, there are still systemic barriers that prevent people from getting access to things. And some of that is social barriers, right? Because people are of a certain race or color or religion or gender identity or sexual orientation or whatever. And especially if people have mental health or substance abuse challenges, like there's this automatic stigma in terms of, am I going to help this person? Or should this person get access to care? So that was one of the commitments I made when I got sober, is that I really wanted to figure out what I could do to help our community, my community, which is LGBTQ, BIPOC, addiction, HIV positive, like all of the above, check. What could I do to help our community get some stability? Because stability looks different for every single person. It could be housing, it could be workforce, it could be education, it could be food, it could be a number of different things, or a combination of different things. And so part of that is removing pathways. Part of that is removing barriers to access and creating pathways. So that's what I've been kind of doing really since 2017, but even before then,
And so, how did you get into drugs in the first place? I interviewed actually a formerly homeless person a few weeks ago, and he said it was just the loss of hope. You know, when he was at university, his professors would tell him there's no hope, climate change is going to destroy the planet, you don't have to worry about jobs, you're useless, and he's like, okay, you know, that's the case, I'm going to get into drugs and try to survive. So what got you into drugs? Was it mental health issues? Loss of purpose?
I'm upset at those professors, by the way, because that's not a good way to teach.
Yeah, I agree.
And
it was Santa Cruz University.
Santa Cruz, like
UC Santa Cruz, yeah.
So for me, growing up, I grew up in Texas, I was born and raised in Texas, which is very much part of the Bible Belt. I don't know how familiar you are with the Bible Belt and like religious extremism. It's very much alive in the South. And so,
so your family was conservative?
Yes, and you know, especially Latino families, communities of color are generally much more conservative.
That's fascinating to me. So you're saying that even though in Texas, like it has like some parts, not all, has a bit of a racist element, it doesn't matter. Like even like Latino communities still like hold these staunch beliefs, so that's why you can see like a lot of Latino communities even being like really conservative, really Republican from time to time. Right.
Yeah, and for whatever reasons they're staunchly religious, like especially in the Latino community, very Catholic based, which is very pro-life, which is very
anti-abortion.
Anti-abortion. Sorry, that's right. Very pro-life.
Yeah.
Okay. And so there is this sort of machismo, Catholic, patriot type of upbringing,
like Brazil.
Yeah, I mean, almost the entire Latino community. I don't speak for the whole Latino community, just for my family, but that's what it was like, right? Growing up very Catholic, and you had certain roles to play, right? And so I knew very young that I was gay, and I think mothers and people can certainly tell, and I was told that I was going to go to hell for being gay, right? This was at a very young age. And in the 80s, growing up, always saw the gay men die from AIDS epidemic, right? And so this is what I believed was going to be my fate, was get AIDS and die. And in the 80s, it was very much, because I was born in the 70s, so I've been around a while, and so not only were gay men dying, but their deaths were being celebrated, right? There was lack of response from the government. There was celebration from churches and community members, and really, we got to see the horrors of society facing an epidemic.
So the irony of the pro-life community celebrating death.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
And we still see that now with immigration and child welfare and all sorts of things. So that was sort of like, I had to really keep things inside in terms of like who I was. But once I went off to college, I went to the University of Texas at Austin, and it was great. I got to start living a little bit more of my authentic self, but still in a very...
So when did you come out officially?
I came out to myself when I was about 22 years old. I came out to myself a little bit before that. I came out to friends when I was about 22. And then...
So all of your university years you were closeted?
Pretty much. I still had girlfriends, because that's what we were supposed to do. I was in fraternities, and I had a grand old time. So, and then after I graduated, is when I started to come out to friends and family. So, when I moved out here to California, I really got to. And moving out here to California was great for two main reasons. One, no one cared that I was gay, but also no one cared that I was skin.
Yeah.
So for the first time, I was now living in a place where there wasn't institutionalized racism. I was now living in a place where I could actually be free. Like, the store clerks didn't follow me around in the stores, or police didn't stop me all the time, or whatever. And I didn't know that wasn't normal. Now I felt like a normal, like equal human being, which is great. So I have been very happy living in California, and I met someone who became my first friend. Long story short, I ended up having to come out to my parents, and so my parents were like, "Don't come home." And despite being such a conservative religious family, there's still this closeness, especially between families. And I'm sure many other types of communities, right? So it hurt, right? It hurt a lot when I was told. At this point, I'm living in San Francisco. My boyfriend was living with me, and I did not know he was a recovering meth addict. He was not in recovery at the time, and so I was
also from the Latino community.
No, he's white.
Okay.
He's white. And I was very sad. It was through the holidays. You know, it was my first holidays without my family. I was very sad. It just introduced me to drugs, and of course, that's all it took, right? It took away that pain and misery, that sorrow, that betrayal, that abandonment, all of those things that I was experiencing, and it also opened the door to an entirely new world of drugs and all the attendant things that come with it. And so the next, that was about 26 years old. The next 7 years was just that decline of drug usage, right? And for
And what was
me,
your job?
I was working at a bank at the time in the Central Valley of California. And I know the bank doesn't exist anymore. We bought out after all these other banks failed.
And how long were you able to keep your job while on drugs?
Well, that I actually worked almost the whole time. No, that's a lie. So I ended up moving to Los Angeles in 2004. And by this point, I'd only maybe been using about 3 years, but I was working for a new company. And so for me, I knew the drug was bad. I didn't really want to do it. But when I would get drunk, it would remove those inhibitions, and then I'd go do meth or whatever. And so so ABC, alcohol becomes crystal, or cocaine, or whatever C you want it to be. And that was sort of the MO that I was around. I was working for a software company here in LA. I didn't really want to come to LA. I didn't like LA. It was too big. I was a small city boy, but and I didn't really like the people. But I had to move here for the job, and so I found a lot of drug people, right? And I worked for this Korean company, and they really love to drink every day after work. So every day after work, we go get drunk, and of course, me being drunk, I wanted to go get drunk, right? So this became this sort of awful ritual of going out every night, getting drunk, and getting high, and starting to fail at work. Somehow I managed to keep that routine for a year and a half. Finally, my manager was like, "I can't let you do this." And she saw what was happening, and she sat me down. She said, "I gotta let you go." From that period, when she let me go in 2006 to the end of 2009, it was just that horrible period of when the addiction really took off. Because it wasn't working, and that's when I held on to my apartment for a little bit longer, and I started moving in with friends and couch surfing and whatever. But I also, that's when I became HIV positive, got raped, got beat up, and got shot at, and all these things that happened.
Did you say rape?
Yes. A big guy like me, right?
Were you
How did
blacked out or?
No, I was just overpowered. I was overpowered by someone, and so he was able to do what he wanted to do, and I could not. I had no strength to fight him off. And it's very dramatic.
Was this indoors or outdoors?
It was indoors. So all of these things happened, right? And it's so. And actually I was sober when the rape happened, but most of these things, I got arrested for possession multiple times. I became HIV positive, and I didn't actually want to go to take care of my. I didn't want to start taking HIV medications because even back then in early 2000s, we're just coming out of AIDS being a death sentence, even though they were ARTs, antiretroviral therapies that were starting to prolong life and showing promise and stuff. Like AIDS was still this really horrible. Right? So remember, I was told when I was a boy, this is what's going to happen to you as a kid. And so here it's happening to me, right? So I was like, cool, this is what's happening, right? So I kept getting really sick, so I ended up in the hospital a lot. I ended up in jails a lot, and
How long were you in jail for?
possession.
And how long?
Oh, it was different times. I think the longest stint was like 3 weeks.
Okay, so not enough time to get you off the drugs.
Oh, and there's also drugs in jail. Like
Because the friend that I interviewed, he said he only got off of drugs because he went to prison. He was there for 6 months, and that really opened his eyes, and then he went to rehab. So,
yeah. Well, prison's different from jail. Right? Prison is state or federal.
sorry, he went to jail, not prison.
Yeah. And I wasn't in jail for 6 months. I think that the longest stint was 3 weeks. And I will say that it did help in my path of recovery. And so it's not necessarily. So it is a part of the story, right? But I think a lot of what happens is. One time I got out of the hospital, my doctor said, "Hey, if you keep going the way you're going, you've got about 6 months to live." And I thought, okay, well that's cool, right? I'm just gonna ride this out, right? Because I'd gotten to this point.
And how long
to
ago
this
was that?
point? What's that?
How long ago was it that you told you had 6 months to live?
This was in 2009.
Oh, okay. So you're still here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So but I'd gotten to this point, being in jail, being in this hospital, that I wasn't suicidal, but I didn't want to be here anymore. I was hoping for that proverbial earthquake to come up and swallow me whole and take me away, right? Or that proverbial bus to come and hit me, and then I wouldn't have to deal with me, I wouldn't have to exist anymore. And so when the doctor said, "Hey, you've got 6 months to live," I'm like, "Cool, this is great." Right? And then a month later, the judge said, "Hey, Robert, if you get arrested one more time, you're going to prison for 3 years." And I thought, that's also great, right? Like, how bad must things be if my only 2 options are death and prison, and I'm excited about either one?
It's
right?
like a tragic comedy.
It was absolutely bleak.
Right. Yeah.
But I was inviting both options, right? Because I couldn't deal with me.
Right.
And then my family came to Los Angeles. They wanted to see what had become of me.
So by this time, you had not spoken with your family since you...
We'd spoken a little bit, right? And there was some, certainly like them adjusting and learning to deal with a gay son. At this time, now 2 gay sons, and talking through how this matters. And I was able to tell them I was HIV positive. I was able to tell them I have an addiction. And so now they're concerned about my health and well-being. And so they came in 2009, and they said, "We love you. We want you to know that we love you. And here's how we're going to help you. And if you don't get sober, there's nothing more we can do." Right? Which was fine. Which was nice. It was probably what I needed to hear. And I heard in an AA meeting once that if I had to define hitting rock bottom as something tangible, it would be what I just lost or am about to lose suddenly becomes more important than my next hit or my next drink or my next whatever. And so for me, it took all 3 things for me to finally wake up, right? And so my family, my freedom, and my life were all on the line, like literally. And I made a decision then that I wanted to live. And so that's when I got sober. That was November 28th, 2009. So that's my sobriety. Almost 14 years. Shy of a couple months, yeah.
And when you say sobriety, it's alcohol, drugs, everything?
Yes, so no alcohol, no drugs, no mind-altering substances.
No marijuana?
No. I don't even drink soda pop anymore. I'll have
Sugar.
an occasional Red Bull, but yeah, I try not to do sugar. I can't resist all donuts, but
Right.
but I try to live a clean life and no cigarettes. Like I realized I didn't get sober just to continue putting toxic things in my body. So I try to live as clean and as healthy as I can. I had very healthy lunch today, so and I only drink water and coffee. So but that was as I was mentioning at the beginning. That was part of my journey in terms of like getting sober and the commitment I made to the community in order to try and do what I can, right? So just being of service, mostly through 12-step programs is where I got my start, and trying to figure out how I went from helping one person to helping groups to then getting engaged with the city of West Hollywood.
No, it's fine.
Gorgeous. Jealous.
Yeah, go.
Hell yeah. Oh. You are totally hot, girl.
So we have nice background.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Just the overall vibe of where this place is. Yeah.
So I eventually became a city official in West Hollywood. I was working at the Lesbian and Gay Advisory Board.
So your felony didn't matter? Your felony, the fact that you were in?
Oh, all my charges were dropped. So because I got clean and sober, I started doing what the courts had asked me to do. It's not one thing. So I'll forget this. So the following June, and I always remember this because it's my dad's birthday. The doctor said, "Hey, Robert, you're doing great." The same doctor that said I had 6 months to live, so now we're at 7 or 8 months in. She said, "You're doing great. You're healthier now than a normal 33-year-old who doesn't have HIV. So congratulations, keep up the good work." The same day, I had court, and the judge said, "Hey, Robert, you're doing a great job. I'm dropping the charges. Free to go." So everything was good, right? Everything was good. I was starting to get my life back on track. Because I had gone from this sort of empty shell of a man wondering what happened to me, this formerly ambitious, motivated person, to this person deep in my addiction, to now finally getting out and getting to be of service to my community, right? And so that service to my community has been sort of the foundation of my work since I got sober 13 and a half years ago. And that's what led me to have an interest in civic government, and then going to UCLA to get my master's in public policy, and now getting to work on a nonprofit that has a public policy department, and we get to literally go out and do advocacy and policy work for all marginalized communities, particularly LGBTQ and BIPOC communities. So that really is to me like a great honor to be able to do that.
So after you got sober, your family, like, how did it go with them? Are they still kind of like, oh, but you're still gay, so we're not really talking to you?
So things are much better, right?
Okay,
I'm a twin, and my twin died from AIDS and in 2012, and he also died from this disease. And so when he died,
was it because he did not know he was HIV?
He did, but he didn't tell anybody, and we still don't really know why to this day. Like, he went into the hospital and died 6 weeks later. That was pretty much how it worked out. And bless you. So we, it was hard, right? But I come from a very large, Latino families are very large. There's over 100 people on my mom's side as it is. My aunts and uncles and cousins. And so his death put all of these issues front and center in my family, right? And so everyone had to come to terms with the fact that we have gay people in the family, which now there are several, gay and lesbian and transgender people in our family, and that recovery or that addiction is an issue, and mental health is an issue, and all these other things, right? So I think it was a very important move because a lot of traditional, especially Catholic families and Latino families, they don't have to talk about it. They hold everything in.
Oh, yes.
And so this put it all out there, right? And so it became incumbent upon me to make sure I'm a good example of what a healthy, sober, gay man living with HIV who's in recovery is, not just for my family, but really for my whole community, right? Because I get to demonstrate on a daily basis how to live this life, right? How to thrive as in recovery, and to talk to people about it, right? So now my entire family's aware, everything's good. There's still having some challenges navigating my transgender nephew and other transgender issues, but they're getting there, right? And to be able to move this entire family from, say, these antiquated beliefs to now, maybe not in full acceptance, but at least the level of acceptance.
Partial.
Yeah, and so things are really good. I've been able to go. I go home and help my parents a lot now. As they're getting older. During COVID, I went home and spent a lot of time with them.
You're talking about Texas?
Texas, and they were very depressed during COVID. They lost some siblings to COVID. Some of my uncles died. And it was hard. It was very hard for them to make it through the last few years. And so I'm grateful that I get to sort of make a living amends and get to go and help them through this pandemic, and especially as my mom's health is failing and she's getting sick, I get to be more present for them. I get to be more of a caretaker, and now it's weird, sort of the role reversal and being able to make sure that she has her bills get paid and getting her medical treatment and things like that, which is really hard being 2,000 miles away, but I work with my other brothers and make sure that she still gets what she needs. So I'm really grateful for that as well, that I get to be present with my family. Sometimes it's still difficult navigating through the political system we have, especially Texas versus California, possible conservative versus liberal situation. But we just have to navigate it because where we are and where we family.
So what could have been done on a policy level to prevent you from being homeless? Is there anything that the government could have done to help you? We know that the root cause was your family situation that led to bad mental state and drugs.
Yeah, so like if you think of like social determinants of health, right, and what sends people or what triggers people into whatever decline that they're experiencing or whatever instability that they're experiencing. For me, I think part of the challenge for me was, at the time there was still a lot of trying to get back to this lack of social acceptance, right? Like marriage equality wasn't the law of the land. Even sodomy, which now legally permits men to have sex with men, didn't even become law, and it's still technically not law. It's just a Supreme Court decision that happened as recent as 2003, and which as we saw from the reversal of Roe versus Wade, could easily be reversed, right? So, like, knowing that society hasn't evolved and I still feel like a second-class citizen when I leave California, that has a huge impact on like who I am, right? I mean, like going to Texas, and now with Texas enacting several anti-LGBTQ laws that are very extreme, and Florida, which has passed a whole bunch of anti-LGBT laws, like going into these states which I've had to go in the last couple of years. I don't even know if I could be comfortable out wearing a rainbow shirt. I know I've tried to be as out as possible. I think that's one of the most important things we could do. And I know, like, say I'm at a rest stop somewhere in Texas or getting some gas somewhere or in Louisiana or something, and without fail, the sales clerks or someone in the store will be like, "Thanks for wearing your shirt. I wish I had the courage to wear it too." So that's always going to stand with me, One day I may get punched or shot, I don't know. But for the most part, 100% of the time, everyone's been grateful for me just to represent, right? To be visible. And I think, what could the government do is to put in sweeping laws of protection and acceptance and that we are equal people. no matter what state we're in, right? The Supreme Court just made a ruling in the 303 creative case that says that a business can now use religious discrimination to discriminate against, use religion to discriminate against someone on sexual orientation or gender identity. Right? So this means that this case just came out last summer, which on the heels of the reversal of Roe versus Wade a year ago.
So does it mean if a business is officially, let's say, Islam, has religious Islam, they can't have it?
They don't have to do business based on. So this also, it's not just for LGBTQ. It could be because of your race. It could be. I have to read the ruling again, but I think this particular ruling, the particular lawsuit was based on sexual orientation and gender identity. So the ruling is permitting that business to do it, to say, no, we're not going to give you service based on those characteristics. But the implications of that are even far more sweeping, right? Because now there's going to be much more cases that say, I don't serve you because you are Islam, I don't serve you because you're brown, or you're unmarried with children, or whatever the case is, or you had an abortion, I'm not serving you. And that's where a lot of these are headed, right? You're going to see a lot more cases coming up. So the Equality Act is on the federal government's platform. The Democrats have been trying to push it at the moment. And right now we have a Republican-led House, so it's not going anywhere at the moment. But the Equality Act literally says you can't discriminate on all these personal characteristics. So even here in California, we have California Family Laws. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Here they are coded as an additional Bill of Rights, so you cannot, in business or government, discriminate against anyone on the basis of their sexual orientation, gender identity, or any of those other identifying characteristics. So this has been the law of the land in California for a while now. Even this 303 creative case, which is federal level implications, can now override California underlines, right? So even in California, a business can now say, I'm not going to serve you because you're gay. So,
do you know of any cases where it's happened? Any examples?
Not in California, but I have been. It's already popping up all over the country, right? As soon as that case was decided, the next day people were putting up signs, we don't serve gays. We don't serve gays. And in fact, there were cases in North Carolina. There was a man who, in 2014, he had posted on Facebook that he and his husband were getting engaged. His fiancée was getting engaged. He was working as a teacher at a Catholic school, and they fired him. He sued on the basis of discrimination and won his case. As soon as this 303 creative case was decided this summer, now there's this nonprofit law firm that is going around picking up all of these cases and appealing them. And they're the ones who led this case for the 303 creative, which, by the way, was a fake business. It was literally. Now that we have a 6-3 leaning conservative Supreme Court, like all these things are literally going out by sorts of the Supreme Court so they can make all these things more So yes, there are already far-reaching impacts, and it's just going to get worse before it gets better until we have a different Supreme Court.
Which is unlikely to happen in the near future.
Probably for the next 30 years, or maybe not that long. A couple of them are getting up in age. So we need federal protections. That's what we need the most, right? Could the government do something? Yes. And I think for me, based on my experience, like having just that level of equality and accessibility for services, because I tell you now, like what's happening in Texas and Florida and other states, people can't go to shelters now. Especially transgender people are really suffering.
They get rejected.
Yeah. And transgender people now have to, like, say if you're a trans woman going to a domestic violence shelter because someone, your partner beat you up or you've been homeless, you have to go, they're going to force you to go to a shelter of your biological sex. So they're putting trans women into men's shelters, which of course just opens them up for hostility and violence. Gender affirming care.
Well, then I could see the other argument where a lot of men could use the label of trans woman to abuse women.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen. There's no evidence that this can happen.
I know it's happened in prisons. there has been a few cases where that has happened. I'm not sure about shelters though.
Yeah. So, and a lot of them, there's just not enough evidence to substantiate those claims, right, on a broader level. And so, what is happening is violence towards transgender people. And now, with a lot of these states putting gender-affirming care bans, drag bans, which are meant to drag bans and the Don't Say Gay are basically meant to don't have any gay paraphernalia, don't use pronouns, don't try to participate in activities that are not in line with biological sex. Like, it's basically erasing and putting you back into this box. And so those are a lot of the challenges that we face, and I think those are a lot of the challenges that cause, at least from what I've seen, people to use drugs, right? To have mental health issues, to fall into an instability of some level, sometimes once you go into that situation, it's hard to recover. It's hard to restabilize, especially with meth addiction. There's about a 96% relapse rate in the first year, and 50% relapse rate in the second year, depending on your methodology. So it's not easy, and in the concept of recidivism, right, in terms of relapse, or if you're in homelessness and trying to exit homelessness and you fall back into homelessness, once you're in the cycle, in the system, it's so hard to get back out, especially once society is scorned you. So there are fewer success stories than there should be. I know there's a lot of attempts to try and put more funding towards housing, put more funding, towards work programs.
But then is it the right solution? If these people are on drugs, don't they need treatment first?
Yeah, like I said, stability looks different for every single person, right? In different estimates, there's only about 25% of the homeless population that is either using substances actively or has mental health issues, right? So that's 75% of the homeless population in California. They are just out on their lives. They don't want to be homeless. They are economically unsustainable for people to live in California because wages are just too low and costs are way too high, especially with this last round of inflation and the eviction moratoriums suspended after COVID. So people are falling into homelessness at higher rates, right? So why they're putting all these solutions, the solutions that they approve for homelessness or gaining some stability, are responding to the statistics or situation as it was several years ago. Those budgets and programs were put in place. Here we are, the situation's worse, right? So it's worse. So more people are falling into homelessness than solutions are able to respond. And there's a terrible, the homeless count. I'm familiar with this.
200,000 in California, 75,000 in the LA County.
Yeah, it's. I think it is absolutely the worst marker of county, because it's like, hey, we're going to go out and use mostly untrained volunteers and just drive around and walk around, and we're going to count and say, like, oh, that person is homeless.
Oh my god, that's how they do it?
Yeah, because I've done it several times. That person is homeless. That kid's wearing a backpack. Okay, we'll count as homeless. And so
and then homeless shelters.
So it's literally just so there's sheltered homeless and unsheltered homeless, and that's one of the first problems. Is that's what the federal government only classifies as homelessness, right? So the federal government says homelessness is either sheltered or unsheltered. You're either on the street or you're in a shelter. LA County and most of the other continuums of care. So the continuums of care are these systems that accept federal funding or state funding and try to manage it to resolve the problems in those particular jurisdictions. So in LA County, there are several continuums of care, and so the county has said the definition of homelessness is more expansive. So it includes people living in their cars or vehicles, people that are doubled up in apartments, right? Because you're only supposed to have so many
RVs.
and couch surfing, and and then there's still more ways that aren't even counted. I think the LAUSD school system in 2019, which is the second largest school system in the country, sent out or did a report that 75,000 of their students were homeless. Right? These are students in the system, which is almost like, I can't remember, I think it's around 600,000 students that are in the LAUSD system. And 75,000 of them are experiencing homelessness at some level, right? So these are students that are having to live doubled up, or live in their cars, or live with other students in order to get to school every day. I forgot where it's from, right? But so the homeless count is terrible, right?
So
It's,
how
and
many
it's only
people is it including?
well,
People?
it's always going to be more, right? So if the homeless count again is just a snapshot on a January night, because they assume that most people will be in shelters in the cold of January. So we're going to go and count how many are shelters and how many are unsheltered. So first of all, methodology and just having a people count they suspect is bad. Then the continuums of care have their own surveys where they go out and talk to people and say, and then they'll use this function, and it changes every year, so I don't know exactly how.
So how would you?
I don't know, right? But let me finish the other part. So, so then they create a formula, and then they extrapolate this formula based on the surveys, the sheltered and the unsheltered. And the unsheltered, like I said, also includes what they suspect is cancer feeding. So it's a very rough number. And especially with a lot of youth, they don't identify as homeless, right? So there's a lot of youth that come here because they get kicked out of their homes for being gay, they get kicked out of their homes for some reason or another. So we have youth from all over the country, all over the world that come here, primarily because there are services that they need. And in fact, there's one survey that says 40% of the youth living in the metropolitan Los Angeles area identify as LGBTQ. So most of them have been kicked out of their homes, right? And so youth, but most of them, when you're talking about, they're not going to identify as homeless. They're just staying at friends' place. They're hanging out with friends, right? So if you do this in-person survey and you're talking to a youth, their character, how they define their existence is completely different.
Well, a lot of the times they're ashamed and they don't admit it to themselves.
Could be shame. Well, but in their minds, they see homelessness as chronic homelessness. The person who's tattered and doesn't have any, they're dirty. That's homelessness, right? They don't consider themselves staying at a friend's place or taking food out of trash cans as homelessness, right? So the whole numbering, the whole estimate is garbage, right? And the unfortunate part is that estimate, that point in time count, is what's used to make policy and budgets all across the board, at city, county, state, and federal levels. So therein is your first major problem.
So if someone who is couch surfing goes to a house shelter, they're not letting.
It depends. One, there would have to be room. In California, they would be permitted to use a shelter of their identity. But it's mostly just room. If you go to downtown, you look at downtown Living Center or any of the Weingart buildings down there, there's always a line. There's never enough room, right? And there are certain shelters. There's shelters for women who have children. There's battered women shelters. And a lot of recovery homes for people with substance abuse. So there are a lot of options out there. There's just not a lot of space. We have probably, and I would even venture to say that you said 75,000 LA County was this year's number.
Yeah.
I would say it's more double, right? If you look at the number of people who are experiencing homelessness from January 1st to December 30th, that 75,000 is an estimate from one night in January. If you look at the number of people that fall into homelessness and exit homelessness throughout the year, that number is even significantly larger. Because the systems are responding to it, just not fast enough, right? Or there's not enough resources to respond. How would I try and count it differently? Definitely, we need the federal government to broaden the definition of homelessness and have a standardized way of tracking doubling up youth homelessness. We have to be managing and even homelessness has to be managed.
I think what's missing in between is diagnosis. Why is this person homeless? Is it out of poverty? Is it mental health? Is it
Most of them is out of economic situation, right? Because
But it seems to me that there's no diagnosis. The state fails to understand who is that person, what's their story, why are they homeless, do they need job training. They just house them, which is oftentimes not enough to help that person in the long term.
Yes and no. So we do know that the majority of people are experiencing homelessness because of economic struggle, right? They have economic insecurity, even if it's a two-person income, and they just can't afford to live in their rent apartments. Or in some of these two-person incomes, whether it's two parents or it's one of the children that's working, sometimes they have to work 3 jobs, right? And even working with 2 or 3 jobs, which, by the way, none of them have health insurance, right? So I think there was an estimate of 65% or 70% of Angelinos in LA County are one economic situation away from falling into homelessness, right? That's a significant number. And so if someone's car breaks down, and that's their only way to get to work, and now they can't afford car repair, now they can't work, right? So that boom, they fall into homelessness. And in a state like California, and which is actually true for most states, you can evict people for no reason, right? You don't have to have a reason to evict anybody. And so, boom, didn't pay, you're out, right? Yeah. So estimates from even just a few years ago, from understanding these social determinants of health and why people fall into homelessness, I think it was about 75% were because of economic shock. They didn't have something happened that they fell into homelessness, and now they can't get out of the system. Right?
How do they get these results?
Surveys, right? And
I think a lot of times people don't admit they're on drugs and they lie. I don't know how accurate that is.
so this was just about economic stability, right? When you're talking with people about drug use, mental health, or trauma, you have to come out about it from a very, very different perspective, right? You have to use a trauma-informed approach, because the last thing you want to do is re-traumatize someone or trigger someone. And so those are much more careful types of situations, right? Because a normal person that's using drugs that's homeless is not just going to be, most of them are not going to be like, yeah, I'm using drugs for this reason. So you need a trained professional that has cultural competency to be able to, whatever language it is, whatever trauma it is, whatever identity this person is, they'll be able to respond in a way that doesn't re-traumatize the person. So it's a trauma-informed approach, so then they can talk to them and get to the root of the situation. Usually that one-on-one type of conversation will often result in a referral or a connection to some services. And so to the 25% of people, it's still down to be, there's 25% of people that want to stay homeless because they are absolutely anti-establishment. They don't want anything on the grid. They don't want any kind of
And they're on drugs.
And a lot of them are on drugs. They're happy in their own place or have mental health challenges. And unfortunately, that 25% is the visible homelessness. These are the ones that are out there, trying to accost you for money or for drugs or masturbating on the street or wherever we are, right? So these pooping. And so this is the visible homelessness that people see, and it creates this disdain for the entire population, right? Because this other 75%, they're still trying, they're in queue for housing, they're in queue for section, they're in queue for workforce development, they're trying to get to their jobs and get some GR, or general relief, and food stamps.
So you said some Angelinos are like one paycheck away from like an eviction or something like that. So that means let's say if they had a flat tire and they couldn't get to work, and then they lost that paycheck from the work. So I know I'm going back to this, but do you think universal basic income would help alleviate some of this? Are you familiar with that? Or?
Yeah, and it depends on how it's right? Like if you were to say, if certain people under certain thresholds, right? Like the universal basic income would make sense for anyone under the federal poverty, right?
Good.
So that federal poverty level in LA County is I think $65,000. Right?
Okay.
And if you have more children and or multiple incomes or more adults in the house or you have more dependents, then that income level changes, right? So if you're thinking about whatever this, let's say 65% of the population is one financial shock, that 65% number comes from being in the federal poverty, right? And so in a county of 10.5 million people, we're looking at like 6-7 million people. How would you put eligibility on that?
Right. So you don't believe in like a true UBI, which is just even everybody who's like rich gets it. It just goes out to everyone, or because like one of the things they're trying to do is saying that it's a floor and it's not a ceiling. So, but that's different. But a lot of people are against people who are like, let's say 100K plus, like getting something like a UBI because like they don't need it. But if we implement it with have you heard of a VAT tax? Like a tax on a value added tax. They have it in Europe. So a value added tax means that like you put a value added tax, like let's say it's like 10% on like not consumer staples but like luxury goods. So everyone would get the UBI, but the people with more money would like pay more into it. So the benefits would go more to the people who are struggling.
Yeah, I mean that's one way to do it.
But that would just be like, yeah.
If you could, the challenge would be convincing rich people to pay more taxes.
Yeah, right. But it would be a point of sales, so it's not
point of like sales tax.
Right. On like
on luxury
mostly,
items.
Yeah, like that.
I mean, I think there's so many different ways to implement basic income. So City of West Hollywood here actually has guaranteed income for people like a certain age and like elderly people that have no income, right? So that they can have some means, right? So there's pilot programs all throughout California for guaranteed incomes. I don't know how implementing a universal income model would work in California because we have such extreme disparity of wealth. And that's one of the ugliest things about California is that we have such wealth, and it is like such a small percentage, and the majority of Californians are struggling just to make ends meet, and still paying exorbitant taxes on it, right? We pay the sunshine tax. So I think there's benefit to it. It just depends on how it would work in California, and I guarantee you it's going to be different in Wyoming and different in Texas because when you have California with the GDP that it has,
I mean, we did have a surplus, and like Newsom sent a bunch. I don't know, like he sent a bunch of stimulus checks, in addition to the federal stimulus check. Like he sent these other stimulus checks, but of course, people had to send in their tax returns or something like that, and a lot of homeless people aren't doing their tax. Don't give a tax return because they're off the grid. So like that's the thing. So of course, it's a multi-pronged approach. But like my philosophy is like there has to be a floor, not because I think a safety net creates like ceilings. A lot of people say they stay on welfare because if they were off welfare and just working jobs, they'd make less money, so they stay on welfare. But like exactly. But the UBI says, look, make as much money as you want. This is just going to come to you. So it kind of puts like some kind of incentive.
And how would you make sure that the people that are not paying taxes get their...
No. Like a true UBI would have nothing to do with that. It's kind of. Are you familiar with Alaska?
Yeah.
Alaska has something called a permanent fund. So every year, as I'm telling you, every citizen of Alaska, like resident of Alaska, gets a portion of the oil. So basically, we're always using our phones. We're always on our phones. We're always using tech. All these tech companies are harvesting all of our data. every time you see the cookies and stuff like that, it's like, why aren't they giving us a piece back for all the data that they're harvesting on us? Because data is the oil of the 21st century. So that was like, I don't know if you're familiar with him. That was his whole shtick when he was doing it.
I mean, I'm familiar with him, but yeah.
But not,
He's the one who created this new party.
Yeah.
I wish Alaska would stop trying to attempt to send their homeless people out of California.
They would. They are.
They're just like Texas is sending their immigrants, Alaska's trying to send their homeless people.
Really?
Keep getting shit on by these oil states.
So they give them like a one-way ticket or a
Bus.
Yeah. Well, Texas bus. Texas is already sending 3 or 4 busloads of immigrants to California, and of course we accept them because
Because Alaska,
evil.
they have to go through Canada.
I think he was gonna. Well, this is the mayor of Anchorage who was. They didn't do it. I think they got a lot of pushback, but he was like, "We're just gonna give him a ticket, send him to LA because we need."
Like what the red states are doing with their immigrants.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say if they had that from their phone, why is it not helping the homeless people?
Your guess is goes fine, man.
I-
But
and I-
it's only once a year, and it's not that. It's like
It's $2,000.
It's like it fluctuates depending on how much oil. But like $2,000 a year is like, what do you
No,
gonna do with
it's
that?
not.
You know, it's nothing, right? Yeah.
So, I mean, I definitely think there's merit to basic income models for everyone, and and maybe a floor is a right solution.
But you see, that's the thing. It's like, let's say that like maybe we didn't have, let's say hypothetically, we didn't have the money to pay for like these things, and let's say like one of our cameras broke or something, like a basic income would allow us to like replenish, whereas let's say if a job relied on like a computer or a phone or something like that, and then you were living paycheck to paycheck, and then this broke and you didn't have enough money to like buy a new one, it would allow for these things, like these unforeseeable circumstances, to not put you out of commission, to not like put you. So that's the thing. But I know it's like homelessness is like a multi-pronged problem. So I'm not here to say like, oh, I'm not saying it's going to solve everything. I'm just saying it's like one piece, like a whole kind of ecosystem.
What I would love to see is like something that really came out of COVID is we had some very terrible responses to COVID as a society, as a government. But are you familiar with syndemic? So we have multiple epidemics, right? We have HIV, we have COVID, we have hepatitis.
It's like a multiplicity.
So it's responding to multiple crises or epidemics in a single response, right? Having a proactive as well as a reactive mechanism in place, so that if another epidemic comes into place, we already have the models in place to prevent widespread, right?
Right.
We tried to use HIV and COVID, it didn't work, right? So, but
HIV is very different.
it's very different, right? But you can still find a way to do a syndemic response if you're looking at syphilis, because STIs are on the rise, and they've been on the rise before COVID. During COVID, they got worse, and now they're still worse, right? So if you have syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, viral hepatitis, HIV, and then other communicable diseases such as COVID, and if you find a way to do a syndemic response that includes mental health, substance abuse, and homelessness, right? How effective would that model look, right? If you're looking at the talking about social determinants of health, here's a communicable disease response as well as sustainability issues, right? To make sure that you're stably housed or have access to stable housing, have access to stable healthcare, and have access to income and education, while getting your substance abuse, mental health, and health care issues addressed, right? Some people have cancer that aren't getting it. Some people have, if they're going through all these situations. So we need systems in place that will be able to respond to the whole person, and not just to, because everything is so siloed in our government.
Yeah.
I can't, like when I go to Sacramento to advocate, I have to go and advocate for one thing. This is one bill that focuses on one issue, and I might get some money to apply it for like LGBTQ foster. Alright, that's one little tiny speck of a giant issue of youth homelessness.
Some people are afraid to go at anything alone. I think maybe like a caseworker or someone there to like hold people's hands and guide them, because there's a difference between like dealing with like this cold, heartless bureaucracy and actually like having someone with you to like talk to like vent with and stuff, instead of, I mean, we've all been through the DMV. It's like this cold, thing where like they're like, okay, stand in that line, be quiet. I think like there's like a human element of just kind of like having somebody to like personally like for instance, it's funny, this travel industry. I went on a cruise. The Norwegian Cruise Line is like giving me my own like cruise coordinator or something like that. Okay, this is for a luxury, but I think people experiencing hardship, but I think that'll be hard to like implement. You can have like one person who like knows their story, knows what they're going through, so they don't have to keep repeating their story to like different people like all the time.
Yeah, and that's called intensive case management.
I
Right.
think there are case managers.
Yeah.
They are.
So
Okay, yeah.
intensive case management would be wonderful, right? Especially for people that are exiting jails and the system, or trying to get out of homelessness, or trying to get stable. Wonderful to have a point person that knows all of these resources that can connect you and get you going. And we don't have that. It's very siloed, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so my dream is to de-silo this entire process of all these different systems, right? Because we have Department of Mental Health, we have Department of Public Health, Department of Social Services, we have Department of Youth, we have Department of Children and Family Services, and none of them really communicate or collaborate.
Same with
right?
healthcare. If you go to a hospital,
Right. It's a mess.
It's just
And so that is those systems, those barriers that continually, it's only going to continue to keep people comprehensive. I like to think of this whole person care model, right? And yes, an intensive case manager with us in a systemic planning system would be wonderful, right? Everyone would be able to go to have their point person, who would be able to respond to them without all these systems, these barriers, and get the solutions in, right? Unfortunately, I have to be in the valley.
of course.
yeah.
I can't believe it's already been an hour. We've just been chatting.
Yeah.
But is there anything else that I can answer?
Well, I wanted to ask you, how would you solve the issue of homelessness for those people that are not accounted for? That's a very long answer. I think one of the challenges that we have, and to your point earlier about how this lack of government response and these big talks and then there's no action. I think part of the challenge is that there was a case. You have to follow me for a minute. There was a case, a district court case that said you can't criminalize someone just for being homeless. Right? This is the Martin versus Boise case from several years ago, and so that impacts the Western District of the United States. And so you see in these bigger cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles, and Las Vegas, and Seattle, in this Western District, because a lot of cities and states are like, well, now we can't criminalize homelessness. Okay, so how do we enforce any kind of ordinances, right? Because you could say you can't block the pathway because of ADA. You can't do this, and so I think so that also implies on loitering and all those other kinds of things, having bulky items. And so there's too many conflicts that are happening in terms of like trying to help people and get them out of the street. And I think there's a lot of people who want to find a very humane response, and that balance is not there, right? The humane response is important, but it's also right now a very slow thing. I'm not saying go out and be inhumane. I'm saying that we need to find a way that can respond to those hard to reach people and connect to them, and still be able to enforce some of these more streamlined. Because again, it's bureaucracy. There's too many legal challenges that are not only preventing people from reaching out to these people,
but finding once we get to them to get there. So we've got to remove all of these systems. And I think, again, I go back to this having a fully systemic response that we're able to say, because I think of homelessness as a crisis, right? I think of homelessness as, and they've already made all their emergency declarations and said that this is a crisis. So there needs to be treated as an emergency response. And that includes substance abuse to me, substance abuse and mental health, as well as other communicable diseases. So if we clear all those pathways, we'll be able to reach them, have a dedicated person, a team that can respond to all the challenges they're facing, and then help them get on the path to success, right? Whatever that looks like. So,
Thank you so much. That's
Perfect.
very
Thank you.
helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Robert.